Hey guys, a very good morning, good afternoon, good evening from whatever location you're tuning in. Happy to invite you for another episode of The Point, where we have conversations with thought leaders and thematic leaders on various issues affecting our society. On set today, we are privileged to have one of the personalities who's going to introduce herself, and let us know what we are going to discuss today. And join me in welcoming her to the show. Karibu.
Thanks, Nyorude, for having me. My name is Stella Swakei. I'm an economics and investments analyst, and I'm happy to be here today at The Point.
Thank you, Swakei. For purposes of putting things to context, we want to have a conversation on the issues of public debt in the country. And happy to have you on set once again. Thank you for honoring our invitation. As a way of providing background, what is public debt and why should it concern us?
Well, public debt is just like any other debt, but this is a loan that is given to the government or the government entities that borrow loans, and now the government has to guarantee them. So with regards to Kenya, public debt is the loans that Kenya has borrowed as a government and the loans that it has guaranteed the government entities, such as, for example, the Kenya Airways. So why public debt should be a concern to any Kenyan citizen is because this money is supposed to be paid by Kenyan taxes. So you should be concerned about it because it's your money that will be used to pay the debt back. And the money has been borrowed to perform different projects or different factors in an economy. And this is supposed to concern you as a citizen because you need to seek accountability from the leaders or from the government that is borrowing this money.
And do we know why governments borrow money? Because I know the constitution allows them to borrow. Do we know the reasons as to why they should borrow?
Yes, we do. So the government cannot entirely depend on revenues because we have bigger projects that we may not be able to finance using the revenues that we collect. So for a country like Kenya, where most of the employed or labor force is in the informal sector, it's very difficult to collect, not difficult per se, but it's challenging to collect enough revenues to be able to manage the budget and also to have big projects. So basically, we borrow, or the government borrows to finance budget deficits, and deficits are the difference between the revenues we collect and the expenditure that we have as a nation. So the government will borrow to finance the budget deficit and also to finance bigger projects that may not be able to be financed by revenues collected.
Okay. I hear you speaking to the fact that given the context and our economy, it might be challenging to have a balanced budget. But I was alive when President Kibaki attempted to achieve this, and at some point we financed our budget to a tune of 97-98%. So what was done then that is different now that makes us difficult to have a balanced budget?
Well, over time, we have borrowed and accumulated our debt. So you've heard time and again that the current debt servicing is taking up to 50% or more than 50% of the Kenyan revenue collections. So what is different now is that the debts that have been accumulating over time are now being paid. They are maturing now. Okay. Most of them, or a huge percentage of it. Then also over time, we've been borrowing debt at a costly figure or costly interest rates. So the burden weighs on the revenues, and we get to see that now most of the revenue again goes to debt servicing. And when we pay most of the debt using our revenues, we are left with another bigger deficit, which we are supposed to now again to finance using debt. So it's this scenario you hear people say you're borrowing John to pay Paul.
Yes. Okay, thank you. So it's from your submission, I hear you make a case that it's not only acquisition of new debts, but also debt servicing is also part of what compounds our debt situation. For the benefit of our viewers, do you know the current debt portfolio for the country?
Yes. We have the figures. We have the figures from the National Treasury as well as the Central Bank of Kenya. So currently, as of January 2024, the total debt is around 11.2 trillion,
Yes.
if I'm not making a mistake. So currently that's the figure, and it can be proved from
Yes.
when the government started borrowing and what they've been paying, because we have these figures. We have
Yes.
the values from the because the National Treasury also releases the exchequer issues, which are the actual expenditures and the actual receipts from revenues. So these figures will show you what the government is borrowing
Yes.
for this particular fiscal year and what the government paid as debt servicing. So when you do the maths,
Yes.
you'll be able to see where we are.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Do we know the composition of our debt?
Yes, we do as well. So our debt is categorized broadly into two. We have external debt
Yes.
and we have domestic debt. So for domestic debt, we have treasury bonds and treasury bills. And we have on external debt, we have bilateral debt, multilateral debt, we have commercial debt, guaranteed debt, and suppliers credit.
Okay.
So in terms of domestic debt and external debt, the composition is usually has been around 50-50, but it differs sometimes.
51-49, yes.
Exactly. So yeah, that's the broader description of the broader categorization of our debt. So in terms of external debt, most of our debt is from multilateral lenders. Multilateral lenders are an example of IMF, we have World Bank,
Yes.
the concessional lenders. Then we have Eurobonds.
Yes.
We also have bilateral debts, and these are debts between governments.
Yes.
So Kenya can borrow from the government of China or the government of US. We also have now the guaranteed debt, but this is a small percentage, around 3% of Kenya's debt. So it's not mostly weighing on Kenya's debt. Then domestically, the larger debt is on treasury bonds as opposed to treasury bills. Treasury bonds are between 80 to 85% over time, while treasury bills are 20 and below.
And below.
Yeah.
So from where you sit, would you recommend borrowing externally or borrowing internally, and why?
Well, the dynamics you look at would be the cost of borrowing. So a multilateral debt is usually cheaper because it's concessional debt and it has better terms
Yes.
with regards to the interest rate as well as the payment periods. So the payment periods are usually a bit extended to give grace to the countries that are borrowing, while domestic debt is in terms of treasury bonds and treasury bills. And as of now, we have seen the domestic rates have entirely or exceedingly gone up for shorter term papers. So this means that the government is borrowing at a costlier rate as opposed to previous times or historical times. But we have seen the interest rates start to come down.
Okay.
So the balance that would help us conclude whether borrowing externally is better than domestically is the cost.
The cost.
So as at now, the cost of borrowing domestically is very high as opposed to borrowing externally. So if we could get money from the World Bank or the IMF or the concessional lenders, it would be better for the government, because now they will be borrowing at a cheaper rate as compared to what they are borrowing domestically.
You and I have the benefit of passing through economics class. Not all of you has had that privilege.
Sure.
What is concessionary loan?
Concessional loans are these loans that have better terms. In terms of what I've said earlier,
They're relatively cheaper.
Yes,
Yes,
exactly.
affordable, yes.
Yes, relatively cheaper in terms of the interest rates and also the
repayment
grace
period, the grace period for repayment.
For repayment.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, that's good. That's great. There have been claims that there are possibility that as a country we might have been repaying debts that would be called non-sovereign debt, what we call in business odious debts. Is this a view that you share?
Well, that's why I mentioned that it can be proved
Yes.
that debt has been borrowed
Yes.
and what has been paid. So if you compare what has been borrowed and what has been paid, the figures are almost the same. But now the issue is these amounts that we are paying are interest payments.
Yes.
So you pay
Not the principal. Not the principal.
Exactly.
Yes.
So
yes.
the principal will accumulate over time.
Yes.
And that you'll find yourself with a huge debt, and yet you've been paying. So the payments we've been doing are the interest payments, but we've not really made any principal payments as we would wish to. But we have seen a few principal payments like the buyback
Yes.
that we did in February.
So if we've been, as a country, we've been paying the interest, and principal has been getting rolled over.
Yeah.
Won't that pose a scenario where it distorts our real debt portfolio? Because if we only pay interest, and we don't attend to the principal. So assuming I ask you what is our current debt portfolio today, is the 11 trillion as at January inclusive of all our debts, principal, interest, and everything?
The debt is for treasury bills. The debt is inclusive of the interest payments. But for bonds, when you look at it, the coupon payments
Yes.
are not entirely, because we've done the maths and seen that the bond, for example, in domestic debt, the bond principals are the only ones that have been included, but the coupon payments have not been included in the particular debt profile. So for the external debt, you see, for external debt, the disclosures are usually not as good as for the treasury bills and treasury
yes.
bonds.
Yes.
You don't know when the maturities are. They do not disclose. They've disclosed that IMF has, for example, lent to Kenya this amount of money, but it has not disclosed whether this is interest or whether this is principal. So the assumption is that this is the principal.
Okay.
Yeah.
You alluded to the fact that we borrow for mega projects, infrastructural projects.
Yeah.
Which could not be adequately funded through the budget. Does the Constitution envisage a situation where we can borrow for recurrent expenditure? Or can we use debt to finance recurrent expenditure?
I don't like to talk about much about the Constitution because it's not my forte. But in my opinion, we should not really borrow to fund recurrent expenditure because recurrent expenditure is not economically viable.
Yes.
There's no way we are going to benefit or to get revenues from recurrent expenditure.
I thought services are provided through people.
They're providing services, but the balance between the capital you're putting into this and the revenues you're getting from them, it's expenditure like the way you spend. I'm not saying it's luxury, but it's like the way you spend on luxury.
There are no returns. There are no direct immediate returns from it.
And even when you come to the project, the projects are very much costly. I don't really know. I can't say for sure that the amounts were put into the development wholly. But even if you look at those particular projects, you don't see the return they are giving you. And even the returns do not match or do not make a lot of sense when you look at the capital that was put into the development and then whatever returns you're getting from them. And that is where we are finding ourselves. For example, the Eurobond that the government bought back in February, we borrowed to repay because the repurchase was contingent on issuing another Eurobond. Then the proceeds were used to repurchase this bond. So that's why we are finding ourselves in such situations, because probably we borrowed and funded non-viable projects or we paid recurrent expenditure at some point.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. At the risk of digressing, was the buyback partly to praise for the behavior of the Kenya shilling at that time?
It helped a lot. Like, it played a very big role.
Tell us.
In terms of how the shilling went. So I like talking about the shilling. So I might talk about it.
No problem. We're okay with that.
Yeah, so we started the year on I'd say a good roll. So when we started the year, the shilling had started depreciating again at a faster rate. When we were getting into the year after New Year, like the first 2 weeks.
Yes.
So when we got to mid-January, we got funding from the IMF.
Yes.
I hope you remember that.
Yes.
Then the shilling started depreciating at a slower pace. Then we got more funding from the Trade Development Bank.
When you said you get more funding, this is debt.
Yes.
Okay.
We got more funding.
Yes, it's good to clarify. It's good to clarify because when you say you got more funding,
Yeah,
it's good so that our viewers understand that this we are talking about debt.
Yes.
Yes.
So we got more debt from TDB and the FDB. These are banks. Then the shilling started behaving well in terms of appreciating.
Now appreciating, yes.
The appreciation was
at a slower rate.
At a very slower rate. Then we got into February. The CBK met on 2nd or 6th, I'm not sure. Then they raised the CBR.
This is now the MPC.
Basis points. Yes, the MPC. So it was a positive move as well. Then they issued a bond, not a Euro bond, a bond, an IFB, an infrastructure bond.
Yes.
So infrastructure bonds are they are very attractive to foreigners because they are tax-free, both foreigners and local investors. So we got...
They are tax-free?
Yeah, they are tax-free. So, and the interest rate was very high.
Very high.
The interest environment was still high. And for even papers of 2 years, we were getting interest rates of 18%. So these increased the attractiveness of this particular paper. Then just the following day after the MPC raised the CBR and issuing the infrastructure bond or offering the infrastructure bond, they announced that they were going to buy back the
Euro bond. Yes.
So they had said earlier, but we didn't see it coming because we didn't see any funding that the government had or any extra money that the government
that they could use to buy back, for buyback, yes.
Yeah, so they announced that they were going to honor their promise and buy back the Euro bond. So now they said we are going to buy back the Euro bond, but for us to buy back the Euro bond from you, we have to issue another Euro bond, which the money we get from it, we will use to repurchase this bond. So the government came and people responded very well because again our interest rates were very high. So other countries like Ivory Coast had issued, but their rate was a bit lower.
Bit low, yes.
Yeah. So now people bid for the bond and it was oversubscribed as we were told by the Treasury, and the government got money. So they bought back around 73% of the Euro bond and a small percentage remained.
That is falling due in June.
Yes. So now, immediately after that, I call the behavior of the shilling in the current environment behavioral economics, because there is no particular fundamental that is supporting the appreciation, whether fast or slow, and it's just sentiment and behavior of people dealing with the currency, because not everyone deals with dollars, exchange, or whatever. So I call it that because of the sentiment. So the sentiment with regards to Kenya being able to meet its debt obligations increased or improved the sentiment both from foreigners and locals. And now the shilling started appreciating very fast.
At a faster rate than before, yes.
And now there were people that the government kept saying they are hoarding dollars. People have dollars. They are waiting, I don't know, for it to get to 200 and all that. So the people who are holding or hoarding these dollars started selling in panic because they didn't. So for example, I exchanged my shillings to dollars at 160, hoping that this money or this exchange will go to 200. And now I'm seeing that it has gone down to 145 or 130. Definitely I'll sell in panic to avoid losses in the future. So that's what happened. And now more dollars got into the market. So the balance is usually the demand and the supply, where we are taking dollars and how the dollars are coming in. So when people sell, the supply increased. And when now the investors subscribed for that bond I had mentioned, the infrastructure bond,
yes,
we got more dollars. So we have more dollars in the market. The sentiment is positive. People think that now the dollar against the shilling will depreciate, or the shilling will appreciate against the dollar. And that's how we found ourselves in the situation that we did. But now we are seeing the shilling depreciating against the dollar again. Or it's sticky around 135, 130.
So what's happening currently? What explains what's happening currently? I'm
still calling it behavioral economics because still it's sentiment. Last week, I think, or last week but one, the chair of the Federal Reserve. So the Federal Reserve is the equivalent of CBK in Kenya.
In US, yes.
Yeah. So inflation in the US has been sticky as well, and the chair noted that it may be hard, or inflation may not be controlled or anchored to their range, their target range, as fast as they were expecting. So that means that, or that meant that, them cutting the Federal Reserve rates is not like the outlook is not as positive as it was before. So now that means that the rates there will remain higher for longer than expected.
Yes.
And now investors will start again seeing the investments in the US or in the advanced economics as more attractive than what
locally,
we have in the local environment or emerging markets.
Okay.
Yeah, so sentiment, that's what I would like people to note, that it's not really fundamental.
There are no fundamentals supporting the behavior of the shilling at that particular time.
So
that you can say this is what led to this. Okay.
Sentiment. Yeah.
Thank you, Swakei. Would you say our debt is sustainable?
Currently, yeah, but if we get to continue in the same way, I am saying it's sustainable because there is room for payment and redemption. What I mean by that is that we have grace period, despite the fact that we have a Eurobond maturing every other year from 2024 up to 2031 or 2032 thereabout. But because the current Eurobonds are amortized in nature, and by amortized I mean they have been divided into different payments, different periods.
Yes.
So like, for example, we have let's say we have the 2027 Eurobond, and it was amortized into, say, two categories. So one matures maybe in 2027, and another one it will mature maybe in 2028. So the small amounts gives the government the ability to be able to pay because they are smaller amounts, not necessarily because they won't pay, but because they are smaller amounts. So in my opinion, I think it's sustainable in that manner. But in terms of being in debt distress, we are heading there at a very fast rate.
So we are on the path to debt distress.
Debt distress, yes.
Your worry is that it's happening very fast than it should.
Yes, because we are borrowing a lot. We have so much debt, and we keep borrowing every other time, and it gets to a point where we are really weighing on our revenues, because so remember we've said that more than 50% of our revenues
goes towards debt servicing.
So the other 50% that remains is this subdivided
development and recurrent,
development,
and even counties,
equitable shares
for the counties.
So the debt distress, we are heading there if we don't do some adjustments and see what we should do to reduce the debt.
If we don't do some adjustments, what is this? What in your mind should be done to either reverse the trend or mitigate against the trend? What should be done?
Well, I keep saying, and I like saying that we do not have a spending revenue problem. Our problem is the spending that
I am aligned.
Yeah.
Yes.
So you cannot spend what you have.
What you don't have.
Yeah, exactly what you don't have. You cannot spend what you don't have.
Yes.
So I think we should really look at the necessities that we have as a country and what needs to be done. I know that we cannot just ignore the debts that we have, because even debt servicing is a fast charge under the consolidated fund
services. Yes.
So what we do is look at our expenditure and look at the revenues we have. So where are we spending so much on the recurrent expenditure? And I remember Moses Kuria made a very interesting point the other day when he said that 1% of the population is using more than 30% of the budget.
Using actually 52%.
Yeah, so you get to see that the recurrent expenditure for civil servants are around, say, 1.2 million, because by fiscal year 2021-2022 they were around 963,000. So as of now, maybe they are 1.5 million
Yes.
or thereabout.
Yes,
So
give
if
or
you
take, I
compare-
even say 2 million.
Yeah, even
give or
2
take,
million.
yes. And an economy of 52 million people.
Exactly.
So,
So
yes.
like 1% of people taking up 30% or more
Or more of that, yes.
of the budget, that is not fair at all. So what
Actually,
is the
he said Kenyans are patient with this 1% lot. Yes.
exactly?
Yes.
So why are we doing that? Why is the economic viability of such a thing? So and I know there's no equality in terms of the payment and the salaries and remuneration. For example, the doctors are on strike right now. They are complaining about their interns salaries being reduced from 200 to
And
70K.
to 70,000, yes.
Exactly. When we have our MPs and our cabinet secretaries getting their remuneration north of 800,000, it really doesn't make sense. So when you look at that particular point, you see that just a few people, even within the 2 million that we are talking about, just a few people are benefiting from this. We are funding just a very small
proportion
population of the country. So it doesn't really make economic sense. And now the problem is the people that we are telling this already know, and they're the ones who are benefiting from that. So that's now where the challenge comes in, because the people that are using most of it are the people that are misappropriating or mismanaging. But I'm very careful when I say that, because I don't have proof. If I was told to stand in the court of law, I don't have any proof of that part. It's really necessary that we look at our revenues and expenditure and do the balance. We should not, again, depend on debt every day, day in, day out. And now the problem is, even right now, the way we are funding debt, we are funding our recurrent expenditure using debt. 3 years, 5 years down the line, we will be repaying this debt, and we will be repaying using revenues or borrowing again. And the cycle continues again and again, because we will not get any returns from the current expenditure.
It's like you borrow from Felix to go and pay and buy lunch.
Exactly.
And nothing comes out of that apart from stomach satisfaction.
Exactly.
Okay.
So it doesn't make sense at all.
So today, if by God's special grace you become the CEO of this enterprise called Kenya, so you are saying we should live within our means.
Exactly.
We should look at our revenues carefully.
Yes.
To inform our expenditure. And how about citizens getting value from the investment? Because even one of the principles under the Constitution is that when you're paying debt, when you're borrowing, it should be sustainable in a way that both the current and the present is spread across current and future generations, so that they're able to pay.
Yes.
So you should. Do you foresee a situation where we can operate without debt?
I don't really think so, because looking at the facts and what I've just said, we are borrowing to pay recurrent expenditure. And you've given a very nice example. You're borrowing Felix to buy land. You will get absolutely nothing.
No value from that land other than the.
So when you're going to repay Felix, you will use debt.
Yes.
So, and that's why I'm saying the cycle will continue every day, day in, day out, until I don't know when. I don't think it's our generation. I don't know who will ever. But the problem is, again, I don't think Kenyans know the power that they hold with regards to seeking accountability.
That's why I brought you here, so that you can remind them of the power they know they have. Yes.
I am very heavy on accountability, because what lacks in our country is accountability.
Yes.
And I keep using the example of our control of budget. She keeps calling out because she's the head of the CFS account or fund. She's the one who is supposed to know whether this money is being used for lawful things, whether it's being used for, like, in accordance to the law.
Yes.
So she calls out the red flags that she sees. She says that this and this happened. I'm seeing salaries being inflated 3 times the recurrent expenditure that we are talking about. This amount was withdrawn without my approval, and so on and so forth. But what happens? We move to the next day, like nothing happened, and we forget about it. So where is accountability? So when Kenyans are able to seek accountability, and you know Kenya is big, and when you're a mass and you are aware that you're the ones who are supposed to seek accountability from the government, they will be able to tell us, and they should tell us. When they do a project and the amounts are way exaggerated, we should seek accountability and ask them, where did the money go? For example, even the Eurobonds that we repurchased in February.
Yes.
Where did the money go? I remember watching TV a few years ago, seeing Eurobond scandal and all that.
Yeah, the money could not be traced.
Exactly.
Where it ended, yes.
So this money, we've borrowed again to repay, and we will probably borrow again to repay this debt. So what are we doing as a country? We need to know, even the other Eurobonds that were borrowed, what exactly was done with the money, and I should be able to know as a citizen, without having to ask the government.
So you're speaking to the issue about value for money.
Exactly.
The money that was borrowed with our names.
Yes.
What did it end up doing?
Yeah.
Did it end up doing something that we would say is returns on our investment? Because when you go out to borrow, it's like we are going out to invest.
Yes.
Okay.
Now we are. Where is the money being invested? We see things like now the SGR took a lot of money, north of 500 billion and all that. We have another one that is being approved from Nairobi to Naivasha. What is the economic value? Even though we are using the SGR, and it reduces the amount of time or how people feel fatigued when they go to Mombasa. Is it really necessary?
But that was not the objective, because we were told, and I remember my senior David Ndi wrote about this for the last 5-7 years. We were told that it was meant to reduce the cargo time, so it was cargo driven. It was cargo driven, but that's not what it's serving. It's not even repaying itself.
Yes. What is the viability? Even the time that we are talking about, is the balance between the reduction of time and the capital expenditure you are using for this project? Do they balance?
No, they don't balance. They don't balance.
So where is the economic viability? Where is the value for money? And every other thing or every other debt that we borrow from external loans from the IMF, from the World Bank, where does the money go? What do we use the money for? We should be able to know, and they should be able to tell us. They should be able to post it under the budget. This was used for this. This Eurobond was borrowed, and this is what it was used for. But we don't get to see that. For you to know what even for something like, maybe digressing, the G2G deal, why don't they give us the details? Why not give us them exact processes that are taking place? So they give us vague information. It's between this country and this country. This is the amount of dollars, but we don't get to see the details of things that are happening.
That public disclosure of what's happening. So it makes accountability difficult.
Exactly.
So you've spoken to the role of the citizen in accountability with respect to public debt. Do non-state actors like civil society have a role in all these conversations? And if they have a role, which is this role?
I believe they do, because it's difficult for an individual to
hold the government accountable.
Exactly.
Yes.
It's even with the...
Unless you're okay, Mtata.
Yes. Yeah, you have the capacity and the resources.
Yes.
But you see, when you're an individual, so for example, like me, I'd wonder why I'm using my resources and what for as an individual. But when you have groups in the society, these are the ones that are really supposed to fight and be activists for the Kenyans who do not have the capacity, the knowledge, and the awareness. So I believe the groups are very well placed.
The civil society, yes.
Yes, they're very well placed. They can do, for example, with regards to the budget and the budget process, the finance bill. Individuals do not really have
the capacity to interrogate and make sense of them, to inform advocacy. Yes.
And you know, issues to do with tax are very complicated.
Yes.
So they need people to understand, and they need groups that are dedicated for that. And I believe we have them.
Yes.
So their role is just to be activists for the individual Kenyans, and also bring more in people. You see, there are people who want to do and to seek accountability. There are people who have the knowledge, but they can't do it at an individual capacity. So these civil societies can bring in more people to create mass, because the bigger the better.
The bigger the better.
Yeah.
Thank you. So from a citizen perspective, you are making a case for increased vigilance.
Yes.
and accountability. And what people don't know out here is that public debt is part of the budget.
Yes.
Because it's one of the mechanisms financing the budget. So when having conversation about the budget, they should not take leave and only focus on taxes.
Yes.
Because what they don't know is that the very same debt are paid through taxes. And if you are to deal with the taxes, we might even start the first process towards mitigating against high taxes.
Yes.
So you speak to us about I know recently, I think some few years, the Republic of Mozambique went to their constitutional court, and they had their part of the debt declared as odious debt for purposes of those who did geography, like my brother Felix. Odious debt is debt that cannot be termed as sovereign debt. It's not taken or applied to the right use the way it was taken. And the likes of Jimmy Wanjiga has been on this case for some time. The only difference is that it might be difficult to prove what is odious debt from what is not odious debt.
Yes.
Do you share in the view that part of what the debt we have as a country since independence, part of it could be odious?
I do.
You share in the view?
Yes.
Speak to us about it.
I do share in the view in that I am using what I hear from the controllers of budget.
Yes.
I am bagging on the fact that they flag out and they call out because you've said odious debt is debt that has not been put into proper use.
Yes. Even the acquisition, the way it was acquired.
Yes, exactly. And even how the in accordance to law, how that money is supposed to be
It's basically unlawful debt.
Exactly.
Yes.
And even the consent of the citizens to use that money in a particular project. I don't think we get to give consent as citizens. For example, on this,
we give through our representatives. Ideally, it's supposed to be through our MPs. Yes.
But I don't think that because they've said that this money was used for this particular thing, it was entirely used for that. So for me, in my view, why I'd say there's odious debt in the country is because we have exaggerated projects and they are unable to tell us or even disclose this is what went here and this is what went here. You get to see things like or claims like 1 kilometer of road, the maths that we do, because they will tell you this road is 10 kilometers and the total amount that was used is XX amount of billions. So when you do the maths and you see like a kilometer is costing a very huge amount of money, you don't really understand why and how. Then the catch is here. A few days or a few years down the line, the roads are unroadworthy again. We have potholes. So when you compare when you compare the amount of money that was put into such a project and the services that it gives and even the durability of such a project, you see it's clear that
value for money issues.
Value for money
issues.
So I do share into the view, and I think an audit, I don't know by who,
needs to be undertaken. Yes. Okay. Okay. Thank you. Indulge me, take you a little bit back. Earlier on, you mentioned about why it should concern every citizen to look at this issue of public debt keenly. Is public debt a wrong thing or a good thing? What are some of the effects of this public debt?
No, that is a good thing if it's used well. It's a bad thing if you're borrowing for
for the wrong reasons and for the wrong use. Yes.
Yeah. So, for example, with Kenya, debt is a very. I like saying that debt is a very huge elephant in the room for us because number one, even when you look at the past 1 or 2 years. The sequence of things that has been happening to Kenya has been, the foundation has been on debt. For example, even with the depreciation of the shilling that we saw in 2023, it was on a large part due to the debt that we have. Because for one, when a country has a huge debt, we have the credit rating agency
going down.
So they will come in and tell you that you guys are in debt distress. We don't think you'll be able to fund your debt. So we don't have a positive outlook for you, and we think that your economy is not stable. Investors don't like that. So investors will move out. Investors will fly out to countries that they think the economy is a bit stable. So that's what happened to us last year. Most credit agencies lowered our outlook and told us that our outlook is now negative. And now we started seeing investors flowing out of the country. So there was no dollar supply. Immediately we have now issues of the shilling depreciating. When the shilling depreciates, we have issues of inflation because we are importing inflation.
Yes.
In terms of our imports being more expensive. Then we got the issue of the G2G deal. So very many things are connected with the debt. So that's why I say that citizens have a role to play, and they need to be aware of what is happening. They need to be aware that this debt concerns them, because we are the ones who are going to pay this debt. We are the ones who are suffering. We are the ones who are getting high cost of living. So it's entirely on us. Even when our lives become difficult or unbearable, our leaders are still having their good lives. When they get sick, they go to China, they fly to India.
Yes.
When we get sick, we go to our hospitals and we find our doctors have
On strike.
So it's us who should be more concerned even than the leaders that we have.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. The other question that I wanted to pose is, do you think it's about time that we hold our debt constant and forget about taking new ones, and then deal with what we have and live within our means? Let's say freeze budget growth for the next 3 years, just deal with the debts that we have and try and balance with service delivery here and there. Is that a better way of looking at this debt in the longer horizon?
Even if we held our budget constant today, it wouldn't be possible to finance it through revenues, because as we see it, or as we talk, our budget is being financed by debt 50%. Like 50% of our budget is being financed by debt. So if we said today we are not going to borrow, all our revenues will go to debt repayment. What will we use for?
So you're saying our given the last 2022-2023, a budget of 3.6 trillion and a revenue collection of 2.3 trillion leaves a deficit of about 1.3.
Yeah, so more than 40%.
More than 40%. So how about cutting our coat according to our size and then trimming our budget downwards? Ask ourselves what is a must, what is a must do. The must do is pay salaries and pay debts, and then you freeze any mega infrastructural development, and then just complete the ones that are at advanced stages. Would that be a better way to look at things?
Development expenditure takes less than around 10%.
Yes.
So when you take 10% of the budget, it's not a significant amount. It's about 396 billion, and the budget is around 4.2 trillion. It's a very
insignificant.
Small, exactly.
So it won't bring the much needed.
Yes. So even if we said we are borrowing today, I don't think we will survive. We won't survive. And if we survive, I don't know where formal employees will be, because I think we will be working for the government now. We will be giving all our money to the government.
Okay. Make our viewers understand this. We've been told our economy is growing. The GDP is growing, and it's projected to grow to between 5.6 to 7%.
Yeah.
Is it possible that an economy grows while the pockets of the citizen are empty? And why would this be the case?
GDP measures the total production.
Yes.
So it doesn't measure the revenues that you get.
Yes.
It measures the total production, including the capital that you put into your business or manufacturing or agriculture. So everything.
Yes.
So when you look at it that way, then you look at the disposable income. So the GDP is growing, or the production is growing, but inflation is still high. So it means that cost of living is high. for formal employees, we're still facing deductions, and you see you're having deductions when your salary is not increasing. So at the end of the day, the disposable income for citizens or Kenyans goes down. So disposable income is the amount of money that you're left with when you do
After you've done your statutory deductions, yes.
all your statutory deductions and also your expenditure.
Yes.
So why people feel that the economy is that all the economy is growing but they can't feel it for themselves because they have empty pockets, it's because they don't have enough, or the disposable income is reducing as opposed to increasing. So if you come to me and tell me that before, like let's say like in 2021, I was having a salary of 60,000. After deductions, I have, let's say, 50,000. So, and after my expenditures, because inflation is a bit low, for example, my disposable income, what I'm left is around 20,000. And now I have the same amount of money, 60,000. We have more deductions. We have the housing levy. NSSF is increasing in every other year. We have SHIF, which is a percentage of gross salary. And now my disposable income is, let's say, 10,000. And then the government comes and tells me that the economy is growing. I won't feel it. Yeah. So it's about disposable income. Yeah.
So there are those also who hold a view that part of the reason as to why we are told on one hand the economy is growing, on the other hand people are getting poorer and poorer, is because the few things the government does, including investing in infrastructure program, these are major projects whose returns will not be seen immediately. Even if it's ripple effect, it will not be seen immediately. So that could also be part of the reason as to some have also said that. Do you share in the same view?
I do. I do. And some projects may not also be directly beneficial. So for example, if you're doing roads, you won't get like the direct revenue from those roads won't be as significant as the indirect revenue. Because for example, roads will connect areas, will open up areas,
will connect
for
the farmer to the market.
Exactly.
And then some urban center would mushroom along the roads, so business but sales and fees are okay.
Yeah, so that would also, I share in the views in that manner. And I also have this I'm inclined to think that when our country has most of the citizens or the labor force in the informal sector, the issues of revenues are really, there's a challenge in that aspect, because now you have, for example, in Kenya, we have like 85% of the labor force
in informal sector. Yes.
So there's too much revenue lost there.
Untapped revenue potential from that, because it's largely an non-formalized economy.
Yes.
Okay.
So when you have a country that is largely an informal economy, you will struggle with revenues. So another area to tap, but I find it very, the government or the people allocated for that, or who are supposed to be doing that, they choose the low-hanging fruits.
Yes.
So they'll go, say, for example, increase the VAT for fuel from 8 to 16%.
Which has not returned, that not brought the desired returns.
Because it's an elastic product and all that. So I think it's important for the government to find ways to bring in the informal sector more into the formal sector, or even find ways to be able to reach the informal sector. So I think the e-teams will help, because even if it's not now, because that's
in the long run.
Yeah, when people are using this to invoice their income, so there'll be a bit of disclosure with regards to that. Even this thing on the housing levy, I know it's an unpopular opinion, but the way these new regulations that say that you have to prove that you have income for you to be given a house or something like that, I also think it's a way of incorporating the informal sector, because the original goal was for the formal sector to build houses for the informal sector, so, or for the people that have a low income. So if the government will be able to see and have people prove that they have income, maybe they may be able to bring in people into the formal sector.
Okay.
Yeah.
There are also other people who hold a view that perhaps it's about time that the country focuses on improving productivity in agriculture as a way of addressing our challenge in the economy.
Yeah.
Do you think that would be, first, do you share in that view, and do you think that's a viable option to take that we have to focus on improving productivity in agriculture?
Not only in agriculture, I think even in other sectors. Because, for example, we just look at agriculture at one sector, as one sector that brings that contributes largely to the GDP. And the reason is because it's a staple, if I'd say a staple activity.
So mainstay, yes.
Yeah, in the country. So then there's 50% of service sector. This is a very good sector to tap into. We have the manufacturing sector, like I think we have untapped areas,
yes,
as opposed to only agriculture. We can focus on every other area apart from agriculture, because you see, agriculture is also affected by weather, and we have not done enough investments in terms of dams and harvesting water.
We still rely on rain-fed agriculture.
Yes, exactly. So I think, in my view, that we should diversify. We should not like put all our effort into agriculture, but we should also diversify into other areas to bring in more revenue, because I think there's opportunity in the manufacturing sector and even in the service sector. Yeah.
Okay. As we draw closer to coming to an end to this conversation, I want you to speak to us in this respect, that the government is a bigger household. So all this conversation that we are having about the government, they also apply at household level.
Yes.
That the issues of living cutting your coat according to your size, you do not spend what you do not have, or that is spending only what you have, and then looking at even if you have to borrow to sustain your operations which are developing in nature, they have to be fiscally sustainable and spread over time. So speak to us now from a macro perspective, come down to a micro perspective, because the people who watch these are not government, the people who watch these are individual people. Yes. So that they connect how this would be relevant to them. Because when someone says public debt, he says, I have no business with the government. How would it relate me? But when you bring it closer to Swakei's level, Duncan's level, Uma's level, Wanjiku's level, Natiom's level, it will be fine.
Yeah.
Yes.
I remember someone said that the leaders we have are the mirrors to who we are.
That was Aden Duale, the CS for defense. Yes, at some point. Yes.
So what we have and what we see, for example, when we see a corrupt leader, it's just because they say it's because it's him. If I was there, I will not agree with that, because now personally I feel I have integrity. So if I was there, probably I'd do the same as what they are doing. So I think it's a broad problem, and it affects everyone in terms of spending, because we start by ourselves, as you said.
Yes.
In your household, we have debt.
Yes.
As a people, like you as an individual, you have some debt somewhere because maybe you have less revenues or less income for yourself than the expenditure that you have. You have needs, you have school fees, you have food you have to buy. So the problem is, you're looking at your income. This is my income and this is my expenditure. You have to take your children to school.
Yes.
But the income that you have, you want to take them to this bigger school than this other
but
one.
Cannot cover. Yes.
Exactly. The government, on the other hand, wants to have this big project, or wants to pay all these 1 million people, while, for example, in an office where 2 people or 3 people are working, one person will be able to work there. So I agree with that fact that whatever we see with our leaders or the people that we have elected is what it mirrors
back to us as individuals. Yes.
Exactly.
That's fine. That's fine. Thank you so much, Swakei, for honoring us with this particular conversation. This is a conversation that we cannot finish ideally in one single sitting. And I know my viewers, should they extend an invitation to invite you one more time under the public demand category, then we will not hesitate to reach out. But as we come to close, I want you to look at this camera and share your final thoughts on this camera. Even if you feel like you want to send some greetings to the people who are dear to you, this is your golden moment as we come close, as we make it a wrap.
Yeah. So my closing remarks will be, I need Kenyans to know that they have the power to seek accountability from their society, from their smallest capacity with regards to the leaders they've elected. So it starts with the MCA. The MCA will go and pressure the senator or the governor. The governor will pressure the MP. And when they go to the parliament, they will speak out. So it's individual. We start from ourselves. We cannot ignore the problems that we face as a country, and we cannot say it's not our role. It's our responsibility. They keep telling us we deserve the leaders that we've elected, which is true. But in my view, I believe that whoever we elect, regardless of who they are, they are not indispensable. We are supposed to ask for accountability, seek for accountability from them, and they should serve us because we are the ones who have employed them. So again, I am really heavy on accountability, and Kenyans should know that they have the power to seek accountability.
Thank you so much, Swakei, for that. I'm particularly impressed that young people are coming out to share their time and speak out on these issues. And we are not basically asking something that is out of this world, because our constitution provides in Article 10 under the values and principles of governance. One of them is public participation, accountability, transparency. So we're just speaking to what already exists. So because if we do not call out on this, that is when we will have the government borrowing on our names, but it's not put proper use. You go to stores, there are no drugs. You go to markets, there are no there are no toilets, there are no street lights, there are no stalls for etc. etc. It boils down as basic as that as it can get. So thank you so much one more time, and to all our viewers, we thank you so much for being part of this by subscribing to our channel, The Point. And for those who are watching us for the first time and have not subscribed, we implore upon you to kindly subscribe, so as you're able to support us and support this continued production. Thank you so much on behalf of the entire team, the production team at the Point. We thank you so much for making this possible. And at that point, they say all is good that ends well. I've been your host, Duncan, and it's a wrap until we do it some other time. Thank you. Asante.
Thanks, Joe.
Karibu.